Everybody, Craig here. Welcome to another very, very special edition of the Casino Business Podcast. I'm here with Nigel Eccles. He's the creator of FanDuel and co-founder and CEO of BetHog, which is a fast-growing crypto casino, which recently you guys announced the debut of Sunny, the world's first AI-powered blackjack dealer. So we're going to get to all that. But first of all, Nigel, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, thank you. Good to be on the show.
So I love hearing entrepreneurial stories, and in researching FanDuel and preparing for this interview, I've learned that FanDuel actually spun out of another company you're working on. Is that right? Maybe
So in 2007, we came up with this idea that we would allow people to trade predictions on news stories. And that's a prediction market. So we launched a prediction market in 2008. That was the first Obama election. And it was, no one had ever heard of it before. It was like very original. In 2009, after the election, interest kind of waned off and we pivoted and became FanDuel. Obviously, FanDuel was a huge success. And for the following, 15 years, ever I had to talk about HubDub, which was, I had to explain to them what a prediction market was. Now, everyone obviously knows what a prediction market was, but it's kind of insane to me that here we are, like 17 years later, and it's like, oh yeah, prediction markets are like, oh wow, like this new thing. We're like, wow, we launched one 17 years ago. It's, we found was that, like, I think prediction markets are brilliant. I'm a huge fan of them. I love the idea that you can trade. I love the idea that, you don't get limited if you're a winner, which can happen with sports books. So I've always been a huge fan of them. The challenge we found was that, the biggest category was sports. And that's why we pivoted in 2009 to focus on sports only and build FanDuel. The other areas like elections are quite a good market, but they're pretty infrequent. And then most other news stories, they're just not as there's not as much interest in betting on them. Although we're seeing a lot of interest now in people betting on like whether somebody will say certain words and stuff, which is kind of fun. But yeah, it's quite funny. We started as a prediction market before we became FanDuel.
And was that first iteration of the prediction market, is it pretty much the same as what you see with Kalshi and Polymarket now, or was there some mechanism?
Yeah, slightly different. At the early stage, we ran it only on play money. We were looking to go real money, but there wasn't really a good means to get money in and out. Like if you look at Polymarket, in particular, they handle like crypto in and out. We launched this before Bitcoin even launched, right? Like this is pre-Bitcoin, so there really was no way to take money at that point. So in fact, we shut it down. We must have shut it. I guess Bitcoin launched at the end of 2008, and so, but it was never in a position where we could have used it at that point. So yeah, it's quite crazy.
Now, I remember fantasy football going back to being a little kid, and my friend's dad on Prodigy, and we're looking at the newspaper doing drafts. And I remember fantasy, it was always the most fun part was the draft for me. And then 2 weeks in the season, I stopped updating the roster and I forget about it. And so when daily fantasy came out, I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. And I don't think people give enough credit to, you came up with that idea, which is now ubiquitous.
Yeah.
But maybe you could talk about like how that stroke of genius happened. What was it where you're like, let's turn this into a daily?
Yeah. So it was kind of, it's kind of funny because we weren't fantasy sports players. And one of the people who worked with us was a fantasy sports player. And we sort of knew that it was around sports prediction. And that was like where we started. Like we started off as a prediction market. And we're like, well, this kind of is a prediction market. You're predicting which players are going to do well. But we find it really confusing, and we were like, well, what if we could design a game that was still fantasy, but it was simple enough for us to understand, and so that was kind of our genesis, which was, we're going to take season-long fantasy sports, but we're going to take away the need to have like 10 friends or 9 or 11 friends that like are in the draft together. We're going to allow you to draft every day. We're going to make the rules as simple as possible. We're going to make the interface as simple as possible so that it's just really easy to get on board. And that was kind of our genesis, which is we're going to make it really simple. So simple that even we could understand that.
Now, as an entrepreneur and growing a business, you're going to get a lot of customer feedback. And I think that what makes a good leader is filtering out like, ignore this versus like, hey, this is something we should really invest in and develop. And again, doing some research here in some of your interviews, it sounded like there was a customer that was like, hey, this snake draft model, it's not going to work. And then maybe you could tell that story about how.
That's a funny story. So very early on, our original model was a snake draft, which is, if you played fantasy, that's kind of the standard way of doing it. And so that's what we did. And I got this user emailed us, and he was like, hey guys, you're doing it all wrong. And I was about to reply going like, hey, what do you know? And, like, and then I thought, he might know more than me, right? Like, and so I was like, deleted that email, wrote another email and said, hey, would you be open to talking to us? And he was like, sure. So I get on the phone and discovered this guy had played every fantasy game online for 20, like he just was like a guru. And so he knew, not only did he know more than me, he knew way more than me. And he was like, look, I really like what you're trying to do, but you should do it on a salary cap model. And so we're like, okay, it sounds like it makes sense, right? So we're like, so I turned to the engineering team and they're like, we think we could build that in about 3 weeks, right? Like, let's give it a go. So we switched to the salary cap model. And honestly, from the moment it launched, it was a hit, right? Like immediately, within about 3 or 4 weeks, it was clear 99% of the game was the salary cap model, and no one was playing the snake draft. So I was like, so sometimes, it is definitely good to listen to your customers. It's sometimes really hard because you've worked really, really, really hard on something, you launch it, and they tell you it's all wrong. That's, it's really hard to kind of separate like your own passion, and you just want to punch through it and say, no, this is right. You just got to adopt this, and then actually go, okay, let's listen and maybe take that feedback.
Now, was the hardest part of switching to that, like figuring out how to price players? Because I remember playing FanDuel early on. I'm like, man, that's you guys did it well, where it's like, homes cost a lot more than some back.
I think we thought that was going to be really hard. We discovered it wasn't that hard, and it never, like, I always thought it had to be this incredible science. And we hired a couple of good people who were just really good at it, and we discovered some things that were kind of funny, which were, often the price would be based on the average performance of the player. But people would, they would overvalue recent performance. So they would like, if LeBron was doing really well in the last 3 games, everyone would pick LeBron, even though that statistically didn't make sense. So we saw some things like this. LeBron was probably we had a price cap on players, and LeBron was so good consistently over that period that we actually had to allow him to go above. Mm-hmm. There was lots of these sort of nuances. Players hated it if they had lots of lineups of all the same player. And that's where we had notably underpriced somebody. They also hated it where some of their favorite players were just dramatically overpriced, so no one would pick them. You just couldn't pick them. So it kind of was, there was definitely science, but there was a little bit of art to kind of player pricing.
Now, with FanDuel, you created the space.
Mm-hmm.
So you were entering a space with no competition.
Yeah.
And BetHog, which I'm excited to talk about, you're wading into a crowded space already. When you launched FanDuel and you started getting traction, were you like, I guess, what was your mindset? Did you know a competitor's going to come in here soon? We got to capture as much markets here as possible? Or like, what was your mindset as you?
Yeah, like it was very competitive from day one. Like Draft Street launched about the same time as us. Was a very, very, like, we were neck and neck with them for several years. DraftKings then launched in 2012. Again, very aggressive competitor. We were growing very rapidly, but honestly, if you talk to anybody in a startup, like even one that's like high growth and successful, it's never easy. It's always kind of terrifying. Like we're growing fast, but are we going as fast as them? Like, we're just one season away from ruin. It's just kind of like, it's always on. We're going to run out of money. What's the ROI and this ad spend? There's so many things that, you're worrying about. So that was true for FanDuel throughout its entire life. Even today, you look at FanDuel and they're number one in sports betting casino, and you think, wow, they're doing great. And then you see the market, and they're like, everyone's talking about prediction markets, and so their stock price is down like 30%, and they're like, maybe we do lose all the shares, prediction markets. Maybe we do have to, and they just actually said they are. getting really aggressive in prediction markets. So I don't think it ever stops. With BetHog, it's a different market in that, crypto casinos have been around since like 2012 or 17. And even earlier, there was like some other products. So it is a pretty big market. The key insight that we have here is we think it's a big market. We just don't think a lot of the products in it are very good. And so with FanDuel, our mantra from day one is we want to build the best product. And then we will market behind it. But what we're not going to do, and which we see a lot in the crypto casino space, is very derivative products, same products, and everyone just markets around price. They're just like, we're going to have the biggest bonuses, the most rake back. And what we want to do is like, look, we're going to give players bonuses. We're generous in that. But we're marketing that we have a unique product and we have the best product in the market. That's where we want to be, so that we're not always just giving out money in order to try and get money back.
Interesting. And BetHog, what's the website? We'll come back to it. We'll talk about that.
It's bethog.com. It's not available in the US, so it's one of the markets that we unfortunately can't offer to, but it is international. It is available broadly internationally.
Got it. Okay. And so, as a leader, there's competitors coming in, and there's a lot of casino marketing executives and casino executives listening to this that may have a new casino opening up down the street. And did you find yourself, like, how often were you having to rally the team and like give a halftime speech to get everybody fired up to compete against them? Or I don't know, maybe you could talk through, like, when these competitors are starting to come up, how do you as a leader keep the team focused on?
So we were always, FanDuel, we were very, very cognizant of the competition. Like, we were the leader from very early on, and we were very focused on retaining that leadership position. And so we were very aggressive around growth. So like, there was one year we only grew 3x, and that was like, in retrospect, that'd have been better if we'd grown 4x or 5x. So we were very conscious about competition, but we knew that winning wasn't. It was about acquiring more users and building a better product and delivering something better for our customers. It wasn't about just following the competition, because we were a leader. Like, we had to be, first to market. We also had to be, sometimes competition came up with new ideas that were good. We had to be like, we couldn't be like, no, not invented here. We're not doing that. We had to be open to, actually adding those features or, so you have to be very focused on competition, make sure they're not, doing anything smart you're not doing. But it's really about your product and your customers. And your marketing that matters. That's what's going to, you're going to retain your leadership position.
So going through FanDuel, I imagine you're an expert in U.S. law.
Mm-hmm.
Being that, obviously I thought it was genius that you guys kind of fit a camel through a head of a pinhole. Like, we found this loophole and you built this amazing business. And then with PASPA falling, and now, like we talked about, there's prediction markets, there's these social sweeps casinos and all that stuff. So I guess where do you see crypto casinos fitting in the current landscape? Is this somewhere some are choosing to operate in the US and you're being more cautious? Or maybe you can give us kind of lay down.
Yeah. Well, so the US, I wouldn't say is unique in this, but it's just this kind of layers of overlapping and inconsistent laws with regards gaming. Some of it's at state level, some of it's federal, some of it overlaps. In some places there's complete gaps. There just isn't clarity, right? Whereas, and then it's partly because that's a federal system, whereas the UK, there's a gaming commission. It's very clear what's gaming, what's not gaming. And if there's any inconsistency, they would clarify it. That doesn't really work in the US. When we were building FanDuel, we had to become very aware of that. And we've seen that with DFS 2.0, like Prize Picks and Underdog. We've seen it with sweepstakes, and now we're seeing with prediction markets. With crypto, like before the change of administration last November, it felt like all of crypto was going to become illegal in the US. Like it was just sort of the last administration's attitude towards it was they wanted to control it and they wanted to make any sort of innovation there illegal. which was hugely damaging. Like I know lots of entrepreneurs who are like, look, I want to build this, but I'm not going to do it in the US. I'm going to leave, which is insane. Like that we had these great entrepreneurs building the future of finance, building new stable coins, new finance rails, and feeling they couldn't do it in the US. And that's dramatically changed. And so sort of our hope, and so at a federal level, I think things look great. Like, they're really adopting crypto. At a state level, it's been a lot slower. Like there isn't a single state in the US where you can deposit money via crypto, which is kind of crazy. Crypto is a $4 trillion asset. It's also, like some people have said, oh, crypto is being used for like money laundering or whatever, funding terrorism. I'm like, you know what the number one thing for money laundering is? It's cash. Mm-hmm. Crypto's actually really bad for it because, like you can trace all of these transactions. So like whenever you see some sort of piece of fraud or something, you can go and look at that wallet and you can see where that money go to. And often you can track it back to a particular person. So if you're wanting to launder money, it's a really bad way to do it. You'd really want to do it via cash. So to me, it's sort of crazy that the sort of state gaming authorities aren't letting regulated casinos to take money in crypto. And that's what we would want. And so we wouldn't come into the US, I don't think, unless we could come in and actually allow our users to play in crypto.
And this is probably an ignorant question. I think people that are familiar with crypto would be like, you're an idiot, Craig. But so if this is legal, what would the process be? Like, let's say I've just got US dollars in my bank account. I want to play in a crypto casino. Do I go somewhere and buy crypto and then deposit?
Very simple. So if you have dollars in your account, you don't want to touch crypto, then you probably won't touch crypto, right? But a lot of, there's that $4 trillion in asset. There's millions of Americans who do own crypto. Mm-hmm. And so what they've done is they've gone to Coinbase and they've gone and bought, now they might have bought Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana. A lot of them though will buy a stable coin. So that's like USDC, USDT. Those are kind of unique in that they're always worth, one of those tokens is always worth $1. Mm-hmm. Now that's not very exciting, but the reason they buy that is because they want to use it on these different products and protocols that will take that in payment. So we take a lot of deposits in USDT and USDC because people don't want the volatility of Bitcoin. They just want, I just want to go gamble. And so we will get people, again, not in the US, we don't operate in the US, but internationally, they'll go to say Binance, they'll buy several $1,000s in USDT, and then they just send it to us. And the process of sending it is you basically just copy an address, like you just hit copy, you paste it into your wallet or your Binance account, and then the money just goes straight from there to our casino, and you see it pop up, and it takes seconds. The great thing for us is when we take like credit card, we're getting hit with 3, 4, 5, 6% charges. With crypto, it's zero. There's no cost, and it's instantaneous, or almost instantaneous. So like, whereas again, with credit card, we're getting hit with, up to 5%, 6% fees. It can take a month for that money actually to come to us. And we're getting hit with fraud, chargebacks, stolen credit cards. None of that happens with crypto.
Interesting. Okay. And people buying crypto on Binance, which they can then move in if they're in a market where it's legal. It's basically no fees to buy or minimal fees to buy.
Minimal fees, minimal fees. The fees are incredibly low.
Now, and so right now, BetHog, and I want to get in the product in a second because I know you're doing a ton to make it unique to. But right now, you're waiting for certain states to say, hey, we'll allow crypto. And have you looked at tribal sovereign nations? Is that something you guys thought about?
Not. And honestly, at the moment, the international market is so strong and we're growing so quickly that we're like, look, the US is somewhere we do want to play at some point, but it's just not a priority right now. The focus is sort of more international growth.
Okay. And then, so you touched on earlier, bold move coming into a market that has, I don't know how many, you've probably counted hundreds or crypto.
Probably thousands. I think probably over 1,000.
Probably over 1,000. And so what maybe you can be specific about like what you saw as like, hey, this is where they're really missing out. I guess you touched on earlier that some of them are just focused on payback and percentages, but what do you see that sets you apart?
Yeah, so I would say probably over 1,000, but of that, there maybe only are, less than 10 are of real scale. And even of those 1,000, I would say there are maybe 2 that I'd say are like really quality products where, things that we think are absolutely key. High quality product, who the founders are, so it's quite like sort of public, so I can trust them. I know that's crazy, but most of those 1,000 casinos, the vast majority of them, you have no idea who's behind them. To me, I would never play in a casino where I don't know, there is an entity that is, I know who's behind it. So we know who they are, and they've clearly invested a lot in the product. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that when I actually play on their own games, they're really well honed, high quality, and a lot of it's just like the animations, the sound, that's really important. Is that really well honed? The other thing is, what is their VIP program like? And VIP program in crypto casino starts at day one. Like, even if somebody when they come in our platform, I think they're bronze level. Now, the rewards you get at bronze aren't great, but they're still there, right? And then you can see the ladder that you can go when you get up to our top one's Hogzilla. And Hogzilla, the rewards are incredible, right? There's a pathway to getting there, and we're very public about it. Whenever you step up a level, there's significant bonuses. So there's just a lot that's done there, and how you do it and how you then communicate with that player, how the product delivers it to the player, that's really, really important.
And you touched on something that's a lot of land-based operators in the US, it's, treating their VIPs a huge focus for them. Do you have humans as well? Is it just a loyalty program? Do you also have hosts that are?
We have a VIP team that is in close personal contact with our top players. That's very important. Like, even though it's all online, it's still, for those VIPs, still a personal business where, if they didn't get a bonus or they had a problem, or, that they have someone they can communicate with directly, that's really, really critical.
And now you recently launched Sunny, which is a new innovation. Is the first AI dealer, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
It's Sunny. So, blackjack's my number one game. If I go to a casino, I play blackjack. I'll play a little bit of craps and roulette, but I always end up back at the blackjack table. So that's always been when I've played. When I play online, I often find myself playing live dealer. And so live dealer is, we basically click on a link and you get a studio, like a Twitch stream, you could say, where you have someone in the studio, like dealing blackjack, right? And I think, it is sort of aspires to be that in-casino experience. My actual experience, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, though, is dramatically worse than that. Yes, it's a real person. Great. And yes, it's real cards. But what I've always found is, often it's late at night for that dealer. They're maybe not a native English speaker, and I don't think they're trained to really necessarily engage at the table. And I think also it's really hard because they are, they're in a studio, they're trying to do a job, and their interaction with you is via text-based interface. And so you can see they're dealing, and then they're looking up and they're like, oh, what is this person saying? And it's just like not that fun an experience. And so we were like, well, we can make this better. Like we can make this a much more fun experience. Like, we can have a dealer who is never tired, is always on, is always fun, but even better, she can remember your name. She can remember the discussions you had with you a month ago, because we're going to build her with AI, right? And so that's what we've done. And we spent several months training an AI dealer, not only how to play cards, but also how to talk with customers, building her personality, building her backstory. And so that's Sunny. And she's incredible. Like, it's really, really fun.
Well, that's amazing. Well, we are, I'm cheering for BetHog. And is there so I know if you're listening to this in the US, you got to wait a little bit before you can play. But any other things our audience should take away from BetHog and your story?
Yeah, like I think one of the things, just like leaning further into AI, I think AI is going to be a revolution in general. But within the gaming industry, I think we've seen a little bit of people are using it in order, like in developing new games. But I think they're missing out on the biggest opportunity here, which is creating. Like I find the online gaming experience sometimes is a little flat compared to the offline experience. Like the online experience is, like the offline experience is very social, very interactive. You want to go and play blackjack with a dealer that's fun. And I think the online experience has just delivered the mechanics of betting, but not the social and the fun aspect. And that's something that we are using AI, and we're also just doing more generally by bringing in social elements. But I just think that is going to be revolutionary for online casino. And I think it's something over the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to see a revolution here.
Well, I agree. We just got back from G2E, and that was the buzzword was AI. And again, I think a lot of operators are trying to figure out how to deal with it. Because I mean, we in our own business, we've experimented with AI. We use it. We started doing some voice AI, and then we found like, all right, it's efficient, but 1 out of 20 interactions, it screwed something up so bad that the VIP was pissed, and it's like, all right, let's dial back. And we use it more internally in some chat-based things. But clearly AI is getting better, and that's
it is definitely getting a lot better.
And I reading about Sunny, it sounds like you guys are putting a big focus on latency and making sure it feels like a very human interaction.
Have a conversation. Absolutely.
Well, I know you are a super busy guy, and I really appreciate your time. So where should people go to learn more about BetHog and what's going on?
Well, so BetHog is bethog.com. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter. I'm Nigel Eccles on Twitter. I talk a lot about the gaming industry and stuff. So it might be a good place to, if you're in the US, just to check me out there.
Awesome. All right, we'll put the links in the description. It's Nigel, Nigel Eccles.
That's
Find
it.
him on X and bethog.com. Nigel, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I learned a ton, so I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.